This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, Isotope, Atom Audio, JZ Microphones, and Spectra 1964. You're hearing my voice right now on the JZ V12 microphone through the Spectra 1964 STX100D mic pre and C610 complementer with Isotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron all recorded safely onto an OWC SSD and mixed on Atom Audio monitors. Please remember to check out our awesome sponsors using the link in the show notes. It's a great way to help support this show. Now get ready to rock.
He put a super narrow bandwidth and automated every tabbed transient. Every time that note hit, he would turn the EQ on and dip it 3 dB. So every time it hit that, it would remove it. And it took about 10 minutes to go through, but I took it back and listened to it and I was perfect. So then I went back over. I said, who taught you that? How did you know how to do that? He goes, it's all math. And I said, well, yeah, but who taught you? And he goes, Mutt Lang.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. The JZ Microphone Vintage Series are built by hand in Latvia, featuring the patented Golden Drop capsule design for enhanced clarity that will give your recordings the classic vintage tone. Our friends at JZ Microphones have also come up with a special offer only available to Recording Studio Rockstars listeners. Use the limited time coupon ROCKSTAR to get 40% off the V67, V47, or V12 microphones. And to make this deal even better, they'll throw in a free shock mount worth $120 for a limited time at jzmic.com. Atom Audio can provide all your monitor needs, whether you are setting up a first-time home studio for recording music or podcasts, or a world-class full-size studio for professional mixing and mastering in stereo or immersive sound. Featuring the XART tweeter and custom DSP onboard processing, the new A-series monitors will perfectly adapt to your studio. Get the Atom Audio monitors and subwoofers that are right for you with an extended 5-year warranty at atomaudio.com. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Billy Decker, aka the Deckerator, an award-winning Nashville mixing engineer and music producer known for his efficient and effective mixing method. He's mixed 16 Billboard #1s to date, such as Dustin Lynch's Riding Roads, and notable artists like Sam Hunt, Chris Young, Rodney Atkins, Parmalee, Colt Ford, and the metal band Starset, to name just a few. He's also mixed George Jones's last album before he passed. Billy made history in July of 2014 when Sam Hunt became the most added new artist of all time. He also works in a unique way. Quote, I mix really fast. Most of my mixes are finished within an hour. To be able to do this, I use a lot of templates in Pro Tools. Instead of spending 2 hours EQing a kick drum, I can do it in 30 seconds because I've set up templates for the album that outline all the basic parameters for each instrument. I can then work on fine-tuning, working on the entire mix rather than focusing on individual adjustments. It's a good way to work. It's fast, efficient, and most importantly, it's fun. And it's fun to read, man. He's been on the show previously and recently for episode RSR399, so please check that out where we dove deep into all these mixing topics. He's also a published author now for his book, Template Mixing and Mastering, The Ultimate Guide to Achieving a Professional Sound, and has created a series of mixing plugins called the Bus Glue Billy Decker Bundle over at Joey Sturgis Tones. And I don't think I wrote this down, but I'll add that I think you've also created a course over at the Pro Mix Academy. Is that right?
That's correct.
So please welcome back Billy Decker to Recording Studio Rockstars. Billy, my man, are you ready to rock?
I am ready to rock. Lil J. Shaw.
Nice, dude. And I guess I
No.
should ask, is it okay that our interview takes longer than your average mix?
Absolutely. Absolutely. For people that don't know the Lil J. Shaw joke, the first time I met him, I didn't see the J, and it's Lidge. And he has to remind me every time I run into him, it's not Lil, Bill, it's Lidge. Come on.
It's not Lil Bill. That's great.
Lil Bill.
That could be yours. You could be Lil Bill.
I'll be Lil Bill. You be Lidge.
All right. Dig it, man. When was the first time we met each other? I don't remember if we met sort of face to face out and about, or if we did that first podcast interview, but we've chatted a few times already for sure.
It was the podcast. I stopped over to your studio, and at the time you were going through that litigation with the studio in your home and all that. And
that sticky widget.
Yes. And now I understand that that's all in the past, my friend, and you came out victorious.
Yes. So of course this will come out later, so things always change a little bit, but generally speaking, our court case is still in the running.
Oh,
because we want it all. We want it all. We want basically all the equal rights and protection that any other home business would get. Gotcha. And what we did win was in 2020, we passed the new legislation at the local Metro Council that legalized home businesses, thereby legalizing home studios and letting people be able to record. And we got rid of their limitation where they were going to make it expire after a few years.
Oh,
we scared them into getting that.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, thanks, man. So I don't think you're joining us in your studio now, but you were there earlier today, and we've talked about it. Now you do have some new things. I noticed. I think you updated your website. Was looking quite elegant.
Thank you.
You had some beautiful photos of the studio. Tell us a little bit more about the warm wooden feel of your studio.
I am over at the Cabin at Westwood, which is right off 8th Avenue. I was at Soundstage for 17 years, and it was time for a change. You know how you get just stuck, being in the same place, the same people all the time. It was time for something new, And I called, put out a few feelers, and I called Mickey Jack Combs, who at the time owned Westwood. He had bought it from, I want to say, the Chanceys, David Malloy. I think Marty Friedrichsen was even a partner at one time. But anyway, Mickey owned it outright. And he was like, hey, I've got this back room that I used to record all of Jason Aldean's vocals. And before that, Tony Castle was over there mixing all of Kenny Chesney's vocals. So he goes, it's a great room. It's awesome, And it was just a blank shell, but it literally is a log cabin. And so I came in, and for anybody that doesn't know, I'd like to think I'm pretty handy at woodwork. I've only taken this finger off one time. Oof, they put it back, but it's pinned. So I can't play a D chord anymore because I didn't rehab it. But you can
borrow like a mother scratcher.
Oh, I'm telling you what, popsicle sticks, all day.
Built-in slide.
Open tuning.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I called a friend of mine who also is a good worker, and he and I made all the baffling, all the cloud, everything we built, So, and the studio owner at the time, Mickey, paid for it. So we just used our own slave labor, but got it exactly how I wanted it to sound. And what's funny is we called a big time studio designer here in Nashville, and he quoted us like 30 grand to just come in and do it. I'm like, what? This cannot be that hard. And then so I called another buddy of mine who was a studio designer. He's like, let me just give you a little secret here. Sit in your sweet spot, hold a mirror out in front. Wherever you see a reflection, just baffle it up, and just always go hard, soft, hard, soft. Now, by any means, I'm not belittling studio designers. I know it's an exact science, but for this application, $2,000 in slave labor versus $30,000
slave labor
just didn't seem right, and the slave was me because I'm the one that did it.
Yeah. So, well, I like a couple of the details in here too, looking at, first of all, how amazing to look around you and see logs on the walls, and just like wood finish everywhere. I love that kind of feel.
What's funny is the front wall acts as a diffuser. Look at it. It's a natural diffuser just because of the angles, the round logs, So the back is dampened, the back wall, the back two corners are bass trapped. There's a cloud over me, and then I just hard, soft, There's a wood ceiling, and there's carpet on the floor, and then there's a wood thing in the middle. So anyway.
I like that. I like that it's like soft and carpeted, but it's wood for rolling around in your chair.
Yes, exactly. And it's a great environment to work in. It's so warm, cozy. I mean, there is something to be said about audio and wood. I am convinced they go together like peanut butter and jelly. You know it?
Yeah.
So wood works with audio. I don't know why. It does.
Are you going to make a plugin called the Woodinator?
The Woody.
The Woody. Yeah, that's probably more appropriate.
Yeah, no kidding.
And then if I'm remembering correctly, you make a lot of cutting boards, and like laminate woods was one of your projects as well, right?
Yeah, I haven't been making as many lately just because I've gotten into actual construction around the home. So my wife and I actually enjoy remodeling homes, taking these older homes and just fixing them up, and then we'll live in them for a while, and then we'll find another one and redo that and just kind of keep bouncing around. But it was really fun when I bought my first framing nailer. That took me out of the cutting board world, and I was just building walls and all that stuff. So I've learned because we've had to get involved with building permits and codes, and I've got to meet all these different trades and stuff, and it's great, So yeah. I educated myself, and I actually have learned more probably in the last year in my spare time about building and the way walls are supposed to be and how high a toilet drains off the ground or all that. So it's been really fascinating, and it's fun. It's very rewarding too. So.
Yeah. Well, of course I came into this from architecture school at first. So I was already paying attention to some of that stuff.
Yeah.
And, funny enough, I remember when I first discovered YouTube, the thing that first blew me away was I was like, oh, wow, you can go over to YouTube and learn how to create like a dovetail miter joint or whatever.
Yeah.
To bring two pieces of wood together. That's amazing,
Yeah.
So that really was my, learning woodworking was like the first thing I thought, wow, that's a good resource used for this resource of YouTube,
Oh, it's amazing. And back in the day, all you had was like a manual, or you'd have to apprentice under somebody or go watch or ask questions. But now I failed 7th grade small engines because my lawnmower engine didn't start. You have to start it at the end of the class.
Hey, at least you had a lawnmower in 7th grade.
Well, and I vowed to someday rectify that. So I went out and bought a broken chainsaw, and all this is in my spare time. Not that I have that much, but I never work weekends. So I always just go outside and get dirty and stuff. But anyway, I got this chainsaw running. So then I did a small boat motor, and then I went over to YouTube, bought an old motorcycle, got it up, made it run. And I've since built 4 and redone 4 motorcycles now. And I'll fix one up, sell it, buy another one, fix it up, make them look like old school bobbers or 50s style cafe racers.
That's fun, man.
Yeah, but I did it off YouTube. You're exactly right.
And so all that is that second passion of yours is your penance for not getting it right in 7th grade.
Yes. Something.
So
no
funny
spark.
enough, there's a parallel to that. Doing this podcast and almost 400 interviews at this point is my penance for when I was at Washington University and I was studying architecture, and I had decided, I joined my buddy Jonathan, and we rushed the Sigma Nu fraternity. But so I made it to all the parties, but one of my assignments was to go and interview all the brothers and get their signature on the paddle. Well,
Sure.
Lo and behold, all those parties, I got mono, and I was out of school for 2 weeks near the end of the semester. So I kind of missed that key window, that sprint time just before the end of the semester. And I came back in, I was like, I'm ready to finish up. And they were like, no, it's too late. You're going to have to join with next semester's rush.
Pledge class.
The pledge class. Yeah.
Pledge class. Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of Animal House. A pledge pin.
Yeah. I was
so anyway, just to clarify that. So I didn't, and I said, screw this, I'm out of here. So then many years later, now I've done so many interviews to make up for it. Billy, I'll just need you to sign my pledge paddle after this is over. I'm going to make a Recording Studio Rockstars paddle for that.
Oh, that's awesome. I was a Fiji at the University of Nebraska, so I understand the Greek life very well.
Nice, man. Nice. So, were you into music at that point too? I
was. I played in a college party band, bar band, dance band.
Those are the best kind.
And that was what was my part-time job. That paid for all my spring break money and my part-time job. So it was great. Yeah, I did.
Oh, yeah. What's your instrument again?
Guitar. Well, it used to be until I can't make a D chord now. But yeah, I wanted to be a rock star like everybody else. And so I went after college. I went to Full Sail to learn how to make demos sound better. Because if you had a good demo, you got more money, bigger parties to play. And once I got down there, I was like, oh, I'm way better at making the music than actually making the music.
Nice.
So I stayed on the other side of the glass and made a career out of it, you know?
That's cool, man. Well, I mean, I guess what would have been the Deckerator version of a gig? I mean, it'd just be like a really fast set list to knock it out. Make it sound great.
Probably 2.5, 3 hours at a bar with no break. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, rock stars, over here. I've got a secret to tell you about how I get a consistent sound mixing over 1,000 hours of Recording Studio Rockstars. My secret is using Isotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron on every single episode. Right now, you're hearing RX breath control, D-click, D-clip, DS, D-plosive, voice denoise, ozone multiband compression, neutron EQ, and limiting, all from Isotope. Go to isotope.com/rockstars and use the secret code ROCK10 and get 10% off any plug-in purchase from Isotope. You can tell your friends, but, be cool about it. My recording studio is proudly powered by OWC, and I love how it's improved and sped up my workflow. OWC can connect all your audio work drives, trackballs, mix controllers, MIDI keyboards, audio interfaces, displays, or cameras so that you can work fast and focus on making your best record ever. Go check out the Mini Stack STX, Thunder Bay 4, or Gemini Thunderbolt 3 dock at macsales.com/rockstars to find the perfect solution for your studio from OWC. Well, very cool. So let's see, I'm looking at your website and I noticed that you also set up, I don't remember whether you had this before, but your desk now has some version of a Pro Tools controller in it.
Yeah, it's the old, I'm still on Pro Tools 10 on the studio system.
That's awesome.
I've got 2021 I think it's 2021. And I've got a UAD Apollo and all that stuff. So I can mix at the beach or whatever. And I have,
Oh, that's on your laptop, you mean?
Yeah. So I've got the exact system cloned on my laptop so I can go back and forth.
That's great. So that's something that we've talked about before, Rockstars, where Billy revealed to us that, when it works, it works. So like if you create a system on a 2010 computer, Pro Tools system, and it's sounding great, you don't have to jump through all the upgrade hoops and get all the newest, latest, greatest. I know that for me, I tried to stay on an old system for quite a long time. And then I found that what was frustrating me was how my system would talk to the internet. I couldn't quite use the new email or the calendar. So that ultimately maybe have pushed me over. But it sounds like with the laptop, you can kind of have both worlds going back and forth.
You know what? I'm on a 2011 computer and I'm on 10.3.9 or something. It's as high as you could go. And it's actually on a platform that's not authorized by Pro Tools. So every once in a while, I'll get the spinning ball and it'll just start, usually it stops. Well, this spinning ball goes, and then I got to restart. So that's what happens when you don't follow rules from Pro Tools and computer specs. But I have an old Pro Control, and that is the last version it works with. You can't go any higher on Pro Tools because the Pro Control won't talk to it.
Right.
So I actually went out and bought 4 other Pro Control master sections, and they're just sitting in a closet. So when this one blows up, I'll just swap it out. You can get them for like $300 on Facebook Marketplace, you know?
That's awesome.
They're old and obsolete, but they fit in that Argosy console perfect. And it's the perfect height. I've never liked the depth and the height of sitting behind an SSL or a Neve. For some reason, it was always too deep. And I always found myself leaning forward and the audio was shooting over my head for some reason. You know, it was just I could never get a grasp of it. So the Argosy is lower, the speakers are down lower, and I don't even have them decoupled because to judge my low end, I actually lean forward. And if my chest rubs under the rub rail and I can feel it vibrate in a certain way, I know my low end's dead on.
So you and Tom Lord Alge, there's two parallels I'll draw. One was because I had a chance to mix with him at a point, and he would stand up and he would reach over and he'd put his hand on the NS10s every once in a while, and he'd just feel for the sound. And that's where I first learned about that idea. I love like reaching around the room and feeling the sound on different things and having that be one of your, you know, it's like a new pair of ears, you know, listening to stuff. And then two was when you said you bought 4 more, that's the same thing that he said. He was like, when you got something that you need that works, even if it's the jam box, you immediately buy, once you know it's your thing, you buy 4 more, and then you've got your backups so that when one breaks, you just keep on going because you don't want to be stuck without your tools.
Yeah, I've got somebody that reached out in the audio community just online. I think they were up in Ohio or something. And they bought one of my books or something like that, you know, but they reached out and said, hey, I just bought a new pair of speakers. I'm getting rid of these Mackies and I had all these extra drivers and woofers. Do you want them? And I'm like, sure, send them down. So this fella just sent me the guts for a brand new set of speakers, you know, just in case mine ever blow up or something like that. And I was like, wow, that's really cool.
And am I remembering that you're on those Mackie 824s or something like that?
Yeah, the Mark IIs, the newer versions. And I actually have another friend that just texted me the other day. And he's like, hey, I'm getting rid of my NS10s. Do you want them? He's like, I'm not even going to sell them. I hate selling, so I don't have time. And he said, do you want them? And I said, if it were a choice between me mixing with my daughter's Hello Kitty headphones for the rest of my life or NS10s, I'm going with Hello Kitty headphones. I hate NS10s. I can't stand NS10s. I said, all they would do is hold open the overdub booth door because the spring's a little loose, you know?
That's
I said, other than that, I'm just going to put them in the dumpster out back, or I might even burn them, you know, put them in the burn pile.
You probably would like the look of my NS10s right now. We're trying to shelf because one of the speakers, one of the woofers turned into confetti.
Oh, geez. That's awesome. Yeah, I've never understood how people can mix on those things. I listened to them one time and it's like, there's just so many things missing. But I mean, some of the greatest mixers in the world swear by them. Alge swears by them. You know, he loves them.
Yeah. Chris Lord Alge, I remember you told some stories about, you know, having an appreciation for his mixing style and speed and all that too.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. So let's see what else is going on there. Now, when you're mixing on the laptop in a newer version, is this also, you know, the Deckerator exploring what the future likes and preparing for possibly switching at some point, or do you just leave that as an unanswered question until it needs to be answered?
No, it's just so that I can go on vacation and not miss work, to be perfectly honest with you. You know?
God, that sounds awful.
So I can, well, you know how it is when you're mixing and you go to the beach for a week, your hands are tied.
It's the problem is the fact that we love what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. And somebody's going to call and say, hey, can you get this? And if I say no, they'll be like, I need it by Friday. I'm going to have to get somebody else to do it, you know?
Yeah.
So I'd rather pay for my vacation. I'm so fast mixing anyway. It'll take a couple hours, make some money, and then hit the beach, you know?
Nice. What kind of beach do you like?
We usually go down to the Destin area, the panhandle of Florida.
Yeah. I haven't been down there yet.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's almost like you're in the Caribbean. You would be shocked at how clear the water is down there in the sand. It's just this little 30-mile stretch, and it has to do with the sandy bottom, and it goes out forever. It's a slow sloping shelf. So
yeah, they always say Destin is like Nashville's beach.
Yeah,
I've heard that.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. What else is new with your studio there? Anything else that we forgot to mention?
No,
I see the jam box off to the side in your pictures.
Jam box from 1999 at Electronic Express is still there.
How do you use that? Is that like play the cassette later or something, or what?
No, it actually has 2 cassettes. That cracks people up, but I have it hardwired to the Pro Control, the headphone output. So I can just hit headphones, go over here, turn up the volume, and it spits out what I'm listening to, and it comes out through the boombox. So that boombox, I bought it because it was the cheapest boombox I could find with line ins, So that way I could pump the mixes through there and reference them. And it's really good for vocal levels and like cymbals and hi-hats. Everything else, it sounds like garbage. It sounds like a
vocal levels,
like a boombox.
Cymbals and hi-hats. What about S's and sibilants?
Yeah. That comes through too. So you can always use the boombox for that, but mostly it's for like vocal levels, it's like real world.
Yeah. And so would it tell you, is it more likely to tell you that the vocals are too quiet in a mix, or will it tell you if the vocals are too loud as well?
Both. Yeah. There's a real sweet spot I've just come to know just because I've had it for so long, So.
Well, let's go straight to that. Let's keep talking about vocals for just a sec. Cause at the risk of talking about stuff we've talked about before, I mean, who cares? Cause it's always fun to talk about mixing music.
Sure.
But,
absolutely.
But like, as far as vocals, what are some of the things you like to listen for when you're mixing vocals? If you feel like reminding us of some of your processing, as part of that, maybe just talk about like what I know you talk about things like bringing the files into a Pro Tools session and then visually immediately like sizing the clips to make sure that the gain hitting your chain is sort of in the right ballpark. Is that again part of your vocal process? And what are some other aspects of your processing that you're like doing a quick glance at to make sure that it's hitting things right and coming out on the other end right?
Yeah, I always just put Pro Tools in medium waveform and gain up the vocals. So there's about a 1/4 inch at the top, blank space, 1/4 inch at the bottom. So it's a good, say if it's 2 inches, just subtract, make your waveform about 1.5 inches high visually, ballpark.
And that would be if you're at a certain, medium zoom means the track itself is medium zoom?
Yeah. Put medium waveform view. Yeah, medium zoom. Yeah. And then I just gain it up and I just ballpark it, And then a lot of times lately I always used to pipe everything through an 1176. And that's because back in the day, everybody was going to a studio and there'd be engineers there that do this day in and day out, and they would not overcompress a vocal. But now with the advent of anybody can record a vocal, I do a lot of stuff from overseas. I get a lot of, bedroom type stuff, you name it. I mean, it comes from everywhere these days. And so I've actually run into the fact that a lot of times the vocal is already squished pretty good, So in that case, I'll flip off that 1176 and I'll put on, there was a company called Massey. You remember the Massey plugins?
Oh yeah, they're great. I still use them. Yeah.
Yeah. I use the L2007 mastering limiter and I just put that on the vocal, drop it to -6, turn the knob to 6, and it works great. And it softens the vocal for some reason. If something's too compressed, I'll put that on. It'll still get it loud enough, but it won't squish it. You can't hear it squishing it,
So just to help clarify that, when we think of limiters, sometimes we think of like gaining up a whole mix. So, and when we move the threshold knob, we're increasing the volume and the gain. But in this case, you're also taking the output and bringing it back down. So it's like you're getting that sound, but keeping it in the ballpark of volume. Is that a fair question?
Actually, I think the Massey has like an auto leveling thing. So if you do start to squeeze it, it does get louder. And I don't ever mess with the output. I just leave it static and I just pull the threshold to 6. It's almost like putting an L2 on it by waves,
Yeah.
So it does bring up the bottom, pulls down the top, but it just seems to not bite the vocal as much,
Yeah, I've always really enjoyed using the L2007. I use that a lot on my output. Sometimes I'll take different limiters and throw them on the output and just kind of pop between ones until I feel like I dig one for a rough mix. Rough mixes are a great place to experiment, I find, like just try new ideas real quick and see what you think, because you get to live with it for a while and you don't get in too much trouble.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't get to do rough mixes just because all I do is mix. So
yeah.
Or all my mixes are rough mixes. There you go.
Yeah. So, we probably talked a little bit about this before, but do you have more to say about, other than the answer just being, I've done this for years and years and years, and I've arrived at my settings. Do you have other things to say about just the process of trying something and then deciding you really like it and mentally making a note, I'm going to keep using this? And, like if we're developing our own templates, mixed templates in our own style too, what thoughts do you have about encouragement for us to get comfortable with choosing our favorite plugins and putting them in order that works?
What I've been doing lately is I am always updating my template. So if I find something I like, I'll turn it into a template. I'll mix something, and it might have sounded good to my ears because of where it was recorded or whatnot. The source material was different, but I will constantly update my template and then just import session data. Like if I find something new on a tweak snare sound or something like that, or on my two bus, I found out that lately I've been needing to add a little bit more, and we're talking maybe a half dB to a dB of 100 hertz with a medium bandwidth on my two bus EQ, just because of the way everything's set up, and I've high passed it on the bass track at 70 hertz. And I'm just finding out that 100, 125, sometimes 120, but it's right in there where it just a little bit just takes your mix and it just goes whoop, and it doesn't muddy it up. It kind of warms it up and fills out the bottom end. So I'm always listening to new music, and I really get excited when I hear something I can't do. So there was an engineer that I tracked down the other day in Nashville, and I want to say he was just a demo guy, and he was like my age when I came. I'm 55 now, and he can't have been doing it for very long, but he's awesome. He's better at me than a lot of stuff. So I was like, holy smokes, I got to call this guy. So I tracked him down on Facebook, and I'm like, would you mind if I took you out and bought you a beer and, grab a burger and picked your brain? He's like, did Billy Decker really just ask me to go out? And I'm thinking in the back of my mind, I'm asking this kid, I want to figure out what the hell he's doing. He's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
that's great. That's always fun to do. My version of that through the podcast has been discovering people on YouTube that are teaching me something. I'm like, this guy's awesome. Or, she's awesome at teaching this. And then just reach out and it's a little tricky, but usually there's an Instagram and I can send a message. I'm like, hey, we want to come on the podcast and talk about that?
Right. Yeah. I do the same thing. And if I can't get them to respond, I'll take a shirtless selfie, and usually they'll yell at me back. And no, I'm teasing.
That's great. Great. All right.
Teasing.
So looking back at your control room again, I see you've put big corner panels in the front, right, and left corners, and the cloud over the top. And, the back of the room maybe doesn't need quite as much craziness as the front where the speakers are. Is that sort of what you found?
Yeah, the two big panels were there. That was the only thing that Mickey Jack actually left. So I was like, oh, they look cool. So I just put those IKEA lights in front of them, which, by the way, I got in 2001. And they've been bumped into like 8 times. So the only thing holding them up is duct tape on the inside.
Nice. I bought a couple for the studio, and I was like, these things are really fragile.
But they're cool looking lights. It just works. So like I said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Or if it is broke, fix it in my case.
There you go.
The back wall is hard, soft. So you can see the stripes, and that was there too. Mickey, or I don't even know how long that's been there, but the studio at Westwood, the front part is connected to the back, but I have my own entrance and no way to get up front. So it's almost like two different buildings. The front is a big tracking room, and it's the same wood and logs. And we actually share the back of an overdub booth is my front wall. So if they're really banging up there loud, I can hear them through the wall. So there's a rock producer that's up front. And unlike Nashville guys, rock producers love making rock records where you do drums for like 4 days and you play the same part over and over and over. And Nashville, you take it in 5 minutes, done, go do the next song,
Yeah.
So anyway, all day long, I was just hearing goom, goom, da, goom, goom, ga. And I'm like, after about 3 hours, I'm like, damn it, I can play that thing with my left-handed. What is taking so long to get this? Plus, you're going to lock it up in Pro Tools anyway. You're going to cut it up, splice it. What the hell are you people doing? So anyway, after about 3 days, just incessantly, goom, goom, ga, goom, and I'm just like, holy shit. I don't know if we can cuss on this podcast.
We can totally swear on this show.
All right. I was like, fucking, no, I'm joking. So anyway, the dudes came out and started to play basketball because there's a basketball court, the band, it was some band out north or something like that. So anyway, I was going to lunch. And before I did, I got on YouTube and piped the worst rap song I could find. That was just that, boom, the kind that shakes car doors. Yeah. And I turned it like 8 in my control room, locked the door and left for 2 hours and took a long lunch. And for 2 hours, that was just shaking the wall. So I was vindicated. I got my revenge.
That's great. Hey, rock stars, are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble getting your mixes to sound great? Do they sound kind of weak or distant or lack punch or clarity? Well, I've got a gift to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding a lot closer to professional mixes. And it's my free introductory course called Mix Master Bundle. This course shows you how to get pro sound with your mixes from your home studio using free plugins and Pro Tools. And the best part is that these fundamental mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus, Studio One, Reaper, or whatever you're using. If you're ready to make your best record ever, then go to mixmasterbundle.com and get started now for free. And you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Yeah, I was going to ask you that about when you're mixing on your Mackie speakers and your Jambox. What sort of volume are you usually at that is like your comfort zone? Do you have moments where you turn it up, turn it back down? What thoughts do you have about just sort of the volume of the speakers and what really works in a space?
Absolutely. I go up and down quite frequently, but, and I'm not saying this to be arrogant, but every athlete has to train and be in practice. And if you're in practice, your muscles are stronger. All right. We actually have muscles in our ears. And because I do this every day, all day, I really do believe that my ears have developed some sort of muscle that allows me to listen longer and louder to stuff where most people be like, if my mom came in, she'd be like, oh my gosh, how do you do this all day? But I am convinced that if I just monitor it up and down, I'll be all right. I can do this for a long, long period of time, but it's because I'm in practice or my ears are in shape, I'd like to think,
Yeah. Well, to take that analogy, hypothetically, just thinking about it, it's like even with exercise, you wouldn't want to be in maxed out mode all the time. You do like, high intensity, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And that's sure. Where you have the recovery in there too. So maybe you're right. Maybe being able to turn it up, but also having the recovery in between is what allows your muscles to build up. I do know there are muscles. We have like a protective membrane aspect to our ear too, over the eardrum, I think. And that's one of the things that they say that when you're drinking, your ability for that protective muscle to protect your eardrum goes away. So I don't know how you feel about that. I don't know if you have found that, some of the the finer things in life, like whiskey and beer, mix well with the studio, or if they're best left to their own devices afterwards?
Well, they actually do, but I tend to maybe have a celebratory drink at the end of a project or something. If there's a whole group, like a cheers, but as a whole, I never drink at work. I really don't. I just wait till I get home. Plus you got to drive too. You don't want to, I have to drive 10 and a half miles to the studio. So I don't want to drink and drive and all that. So
I remember when I first started making records and I'd see people who, some people, their thing was to be smoking all day while they were in the studio. And some people, they'd be breaking out beers and drinks. And I just thought the same thing. I was like, I don't think I can really do that and work. I think like that's a different thing for me. I can either have a great party or I could get the work done. Yeah.
And you got to figure how many jobs are out there that you can just show up and start drinking at your job,
I don't know, but I'm getting ready to do a power weekend with my buddies making music, and there will be a lot of beer flowing and anything goes. So often what I find is that first song we're tracking, I get all excited. I'm like, turn up my headphones, play the guitar, rock out. And then after that, I'm like, oh my God, what did I do to myself? And then I put in earplugs. I turn everything way down for the rest of the weekend and I survive.
That's awesome. That's
great.
Awesome.
Are you still ever playing music? Are you sort of enjoying picking up guitars? Are you writing, doing any of those kind of things too?
No, I had, I don't know if you knew this, but I was a staff songwriter at Curb for 5 years. I had a staff publishing deal. Yeah. And I wrote over there for 5 years. And then Scott Hendricks owned a company called Big Tractor Music. And Ben Vaughn, who runs Warner Brothers now, was Scott's creative director. And he actually signed me for 2 years over there. And then he went over to Warner and I was doing dual jobs. And finally I had to choose because it was just getting too much. I couldn't do both, So, and I really enjoyed engineering. The only reason I did songwriting is because I was able to, from playing in the bands and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I would get just enough cuts to keep me around for another year, So, but I never hit the big lick. So maybe that's why I let that dream slip away,
I bet it really informed you, though, as far as a mixer, even to really understand what's needed for a well-done song. Know when something's missing, know when something's new and different.
Oh, yeah. No, songwriters are crazy. Artists are crazy. They really are. You know what I mean? They're young, egotistical children, for lack of a better term.
Gotta love them.
Yes, you can't live without them. Couldn't make a living without them. But when I'm sitting in the studio and a songwriter comes in and I'm mixing and they're like, that guitar part, I really wish it would sound it right now. It sounds green. I really wish it would sound red or something like that. So I'm like, okay, you know what? I was a songwriter. Red's kind of like fire, edgy, and blue is sad, dark, gray is muffled, So I'm like, okay. So then 2 days later, the songwriter comes back, that green guitar I was talking about, is there any way, instead of red, can we make it more magenta? And I'm like, okay, remember that story about me being able to relate because I used to write songs? I have no idea what the hell you're talking about.
That's great.
But no, it helped me become a better engineer because I get it. And I know that if I'm mixing something and I don't take care of their baby, if I slap their baby and call them ugly, they're going to be like, they're never going to come back again, and a lot of engineers make that mistake. So it's just, it's etiquette. It's how to deal with people. And it made me a better engineer walking on that side of the line.
I think there's a lot to be learned by getting in everybody else's shoes for a moment, even if it's just for a little while, in a recording session, you really begin to understand things. I guess if you're mixing, you're not experiencing the tracking conundrum quite as much, but I'm sure you did in the past, and understanding what's it like for the musician who's out there playing when you're, in the control room, giving them feedback or telling them what to do, or, giving them what they asked for in the headphones or not giving them what they asked for in the headphones, stuff like that. But in the mix process, for sure, I know what it's like to be a mixing engineer and you get a request and you're like, man, motherfucker, they want this, they want that.
Right.
What a pain, and then you put yourself in the other shoes and you're like, God, it just needs a thing here, and that's what counts. I mean, you gotta make it right for the artist, right?
At the end of the day, I get to go on, mix another project. They have to live with this thing. So it's my job to help them get there and make them love it, All
right. Here's a question for you. Are we ultimately mixing a song for the artist, or are we mixing a song for the listener? Dun, dun, dun.
You know what? Here's how I'll answer that. I think good engineers and successful engineers are engineers that know how to interpret music and make the masses love them. So if, for instance, if I mix a song and the only person that thinks it sounds good is my mom, I'm probably not a good engineer. I should try a different line of work. If I mix a song and it's loved by the masses, and everybody's just like, man, this feels good. It sounds good. That's probably a good sign. So I would like to think I have a little bit of a gift in how to appeal to the masses, So I've got a very good commercial sense, I think, in the tones I choose, the frequencies I boost, and stuff like that. Back to your question, I please the masses at first. So I mix for the masses, or the listener, but the tweaks, when the artist comes in, those are for him or her. So I'll get it where I think it sounds good to the world. And then anything he or she wants to do, I'll make those tweaks for the artist.
Yeah, that's a great answer. That's a great answer. So then that makes me want to ask, how do you arrive at an understanding of what the masses like in a mix? For example, it's one thing to understand that concept. It's another thing to think, I know what a large group of people are going to actually like. What are some ways that you make yourself feel more comfortable about understanding that?
Well, at this point in time, if I think something sounds good, I know the masses are going to like it. And I don't say that boastful. I'm just saying, that old diatribe or whatever that quote is, that you have 10,000 hours and you become a quote unquote expert. I've put in probably 3 times that much. You know what I mean? So I know for a fact, just because of the fact I'm still employed after doing this for 27 years, and people are still paying me to do it. So I found out probably about 7 or 8 years ago to really start trusting my gut.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been kind of a naysayer about my own music. Like I was telling you the example, that young engineer, I heard something. I'm like, damn it, why can't I make it sound like that? And then here he's thinking, oh, if I could only make it sound like Billy Decker does and blah, 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 So I've started to slowly go, you know what? Maybe I don't suck as bad as I think. But
Nice.
But deep down inside, you would be surprised at how probably insecure I am about my mixes. You know what I mean? So I don't know if that's just being humble, or I don't know if that's being insecure or what, but I try not to take it too serious, but at the same time, I don't think I can say I've ever mixed the perfect mix and I could just step back and go, I'm done. That's awesome. I can never beat this again. I still get up and look forward to working in the studio every day, trying new sounds and trying to make stuff bigger, larger than life,
Yeah. So do you feel like, if you were to rewind a while to the point where you're still trying to discover your cross-section of what you do and what everybody wants to hear, do you think that that's just sort of that constant exploring and just pursuing different sounds and trying things out, and then you just naturally sort of discover what works?
My problem with myself, if I could rewind my career, is I never got to mentor under anybody. I just went to audio school, convinced somebody to hire me as an engineer, and I faked it, And so I never had anybody to tell me what I was doing was right or wrong. So that is part of the delayed, I was still having success and making money and all that stuff. But inside I was like, I don't even know what the hell I'm doing, if this is right or wrong. It sounds good. People are paying me, so maybe it is right, But if I could have gone back, I would have loved to have been able to study under somebody. I'm being an assistant engineer. I was never an assistant engineer, unfortunately. That's my biggest regret. That and not taking music theory in high school or college. I wish I would have majored in it. So, for instance, like I had Ilya Tolshinsky. Ilya. Everybody knows Ilya in Nashville. He's a savant guitar player, banjo, all that utility stuff. He came in, I was doing something for him. I think just a demo or something. I always tell this story. It was about 7-8 years ago. And I'm like, hey, do you want me to tune this vocal for you? He's like, I said, do you want me to draw it out? And it usually takes about an hour for me to line draw a vocal out to make it sound. He's like, nah. I'm like, what? He's like, no, just put auto tune on. I'm like, dude, that's not going to work. He's like, no. Snap it up. We're in the key of F minor diminished, take out the G, C, B, flip this upside down, blah, blah. He was taking notes, add notes, and he just ran it through auto tune and it was perfect. And I'm like, how did you do that? He goes, music theory, dude. That's what I do. And I'm like, oh my gosh, because I'll put it on and it sounds like T-Pain. It's yanking it up and down and hitting wrong notes. And so that's my one regret. I wish, and I convinced my daughter to major in music theory in college, and she did it. I think to this day, she hates me for making her go to college, but it's something I really wanted. And so I guess I get to live through my daughter. I've called her a couple of times and say, hey, and I'll play something over
vocal and it goes like this.
Yes. I'll play it over the thing. And then she'll say, oh, do this. It's key of C, take this, blah, blah, blah there,
That's great. Well, it's a good reminder too, just that thinking that like the stuff we learn, if you say I should have learned music theory, somebody's first question is, oh, because you wanted to play more guitar and be more of a guitarist. But really you're pointing out that it's these deeper understandings of these elements of what we do that apply to, us, the engineer, the mixer, the technician. It's like knowing how to understand the fundamentals of the music that's in the song that we're mixing really makes a big deal. I mean, I know that, I can imagine understanding by ear even, like where things are going and what the bass line's doing, how close it's getting to the voicing of a piano, understanding things like don't put the left hand in the piano part right here because there's a bass guitar right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Stuff like that can really help,
Yeah. I actually spoke at a music conference out in Vegas a couple years ago, and the topic was they asked me what I wanted to call my lecture. And I said, you know what? I am going to have somebody sit down in front of the computer. It was on a stage with the big screen. They were mixing in, I think, Logic or something. And everybody knows I'm a Pro Tools guy. And I'm going to hand him some audio on a hard drive, plug it in, and I am going to tell him how to mix without even doing it, hearing it. He's just going to do exactly what I say. And I called the lecture Master of Frequencies, not because I think I'm a master of frequencies, but if you become a master and understand frequencies and what lives between 100 hertz and 240 hertz, what instruments there, where the human voice lives, all that stuff. I proved to the class that I can just call out numbers and frequencies, say, okay, put a compressor there, put it at 3-to-1, super slow attack, super fast release. Okay, let's go. Put an EQ. I'm going to tell you what to do to suck out of the voice. It's a male singer. It's never going to be anything out of this range because I know a male voice lives there. That's where this is. That's it. So you make yourself a master of that. And to prove a point, we didn't even listen to anything until we got that loaded up and got everything dialed. Then I said, hit play. And it was 90% of the way there.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So
is that one that's online now?
It was for the Unstoppable Recording Machine.
Oh, cool. Those guys are great.
Yeah, Joey's school and Ayal and Joel. But they had me mix a song, and I also handed out a flyer that I found on the internet that has frequencies of musical notes and then also what instruments live there,
Yeah,
so
those
it's like
are
human
fun.
voice. Oh, they're great, and a lot of people were just like, wow, I didn't understand that it was, it was that easy. And at the end of the day, and then I'll let you jump in here, everything is math. Everything is math, So for one time, I was mixing over at County Q, and this was way back in the day. And Joey Moy was in the other room. He was renting a room, and I think he was working on the first Florida Georgia album, Florida Georgia Line album, the Cruise record, And anyway, I was mixing this song, and every time the bass would hit this resonant frequency, it would just go boom. And I was like, son of a bitch. How, so I got out of my chair. I walked like 20 yards to the other building, banged on the door. I said, hey, Joey, I'm Billy Decker. I said, I have a question for you. Do you know how to fix this? He's like, yeah, come on in. Let me show you. So he goes, all right, pop up an EQ. Let's find out what the note is. And he goes, so it was like a B or something like that. So he gets on his computer, frequencies of musical notes, finds the actual frequency of a B in that register. And then he put a super narrow bandwidth and automated every tabbed transient. Every time that note hit, he would turn the EQ on and dip it 3 dB and back and forth. So every time it hit that, it would remove it. And it took about 10 minutes to go through. And the song looked like a little seismograph, because the guy was hitting a lot of B's.
Yeah.
But I took it back and listened to it, and I was perfect. So then I went back over. I said, who taught you that? How did you know how to do that? He goes, it's all math. And I said, well, yeah, but who taught you? And he goes, Mutt Lang. and he goes, how many times has Mutt Lang ever been wrong? Never. I'm like,
that's awesome.
Sold.
That's great, man. That's great. Atom Audio introduces the all-new A-Series line of monitors, featuring the XART accelerated ribbon tweeter design, built-in DSP-based room correction, and speaker voicings, allowing you to customize your Atom Audio monitors to fit your control room. The A-Series will rock in any studio. Small studio spaces or immersive multi-speaker configurations are perfect for the A4V or the new A7V, the next generation of the incredibly popular A7X. Mid-sized rooms and narrow spaces will love the low profile of the A44H, expanding on the A7V sound, or the A77H, a true three-way midfield monitor delivering rich, spacious sound. And bigger studios will love the A8H, a three-way speaker and the pinnacle of the A-Series that delivers extremely accurate sound required for critical listening environments. Get the Atom Audio monitors and subwoofers that are right for your studio with an extended 5-year warranty at atomaudio.com. Every studio needs a good vintage mic for that classic warm sound. Whether you're looking for those airy highs, sweet mid-range, or silky low end, a good vintage mic can put the magic in your mixes. So it's no wonder vintage mics have been loved and praised by thousands of engineers for decades. The JZ Microphone Vintage Series are built by hand in Latvia using only the best electronic components and feature the patented Golden Drop capsule design for great detail and richness of tone that will bring that classic vintage vibe to your studio and be a real workhorse for your sessions. This time, our friends at JZ Microphones have come up with a special offer just for you, rock stars. Use the coupon ROCKSTAR to get 40% off the Vintage Series mics V67, V47, or V12, the mic you're hearing right now. Plus, they'll throw in a free shock mount worth $120 for a limited time at jzmic.com. Howdy, Rockstars. We're back now for the Jam Session. My guest today is Billy Decker, joining us from his home, actually. I think you're just jamming with us from the home front. And I'm in my home office. So there we go. We're not even in a studio right now, but we get to talk about studios. So, Billy, you ready to jam?
Lil J. Shaw From now on, you will address me as Sir, Mr. Decker, sir, before every question.
Sir, Mr. Decker, Sir, Lil Bill.
Lidge, no, I'm ready to jam. But before I do, can I tell you something exciting?
Please do.
That just happened to me. So, I wrote this book called Template Mixing and Mastering. It's done really good. It's a niche market. I'm never going to get rich unless you're like James Patterson in the airport or writing Harry Potter or something, But it's done really good. A friend of mine just became an adjunct professor at the University of Texas in Arlington in the audio department. He is making my book mandatory reading for all the students in the program from here on out. And 2 to 3 times a year, they fly me down and I get to speak at the University of Texas. My first one is actually November 1st.
That's awesome. This will be out later than that, but by that time we can find out how it went too, which is cool.
Absolutely.
And I'm so glad you brought up your book because that was literally my next question, which is,
oh, wow.
How is your book doing? You've got this incredible book that you wrote that let me make sure I get the full title correctly here. But it is called The Ultimate Guide to Achieving a Professional, Template Mixing and Mastering, The Ultimate Guide to Achieving a Professional Sound. And in the book, you do this wonderful breakdown of, in written fashion of exactly what your template is, how to set it up. There's even this great grid in there that shows you how to route all the stuff for your routing. And so I think the first move is like set it all up. I haven't set it up personally yet myself, but my close friend, Matt Boudreau from Working Class Audio, he did. And he said he set it up. He did the exact same thing, threw in the tracks, hit play, and he was like, holy shit, it sounds great. So that's cool, man.
That is fun. No, it's been really fun. What's been a neat little outreach branch of that is someone set up a Facebook page for the Template Mixing and Mastering. And it's been a great forum to go to if you ever have questions. I'll get tons of like Facebook Messenger and stuff like that. And I'm like, hey, do me a favor, sign up over at the Template Mixing and Mastering Facebook page. There's way smarter people over there that have decoded this for all DAWs. And people are sharing like Logic templates, Reaper templates, and everybody's so cool over there. You know what I mean? There's none of that flaming stuff and what do they call that when you start arguing with somebody and online and you get banned from it or whatever that's called,
I think it's called Facebook.
Yeah, no kidding. But anyway, that's been neat, but it's grown to over like 800 people now, That's fantastic.
And then we'll give a shout out to your boy, Simon, who I've had some great chats with too, who's integral in helping this book come together with you.
Absolutely. He's got a new book out he just put out as well regarding mastering.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I just gave him a shout out. We actually have a publisher for Template Mixing and Mastering. It went through the Crowwood Press, which is United Kingdom company. He decided to self-publish his new book just out of curiosity to see royalty rates and standards, after you've got something. Is it better to self-publish or is it still better to go, you get a wider outreach with a full-on publisher, So it's going to be a neat little beta test. He called me a couple weeks ago and said, I've got this new book out. And he's like, it'll be neat, because we've actually been asked to write another book for Crowwood.
Oh, cool.
So they approached us and said, we're one of their best sellers and they'd love for us to do another book,
That's great. You guys are working on your publishing template for your mixing template.
We need to work on our financial template.
One thing at a time. Hey, well, that's the nature of music. That's why I always say that like the best thing and the worst thing about what we do is the fact that we love doing it. Because it's great because it's really fun to go to work every day. But what's a pain about doing music sometimes and being a creative is that I tend to over deliver on everything because I enjoy doing it. And then I find out whether it works or not,
Yeah.
Whether it's music and recording or, working with a particular band in the studio, any of that stuff.
That's funny. That's funny.
Now you also have a course, I think, that you put together for that, where you're teaching some of that stuff over at Pro Mix Academy.
Yep, with Warren Hewitt, they came and filmed me, and that's been going great, So he's a truly a true gentleman. He's a great guy. I have nothing but praise for that man. He's built such a cool little thing, So, and I did
Warren's
the same.
Great. He's on recently. I did an interview with him.
Oh yeah, he's great. And Joel and Eyal on Unstoppable, they're great. I did a Nail the Mix episode for them. I did an episode for ThinkSpace over in London, I believe, United Kingdom company, and they came and filmed me. And it's an online music school, a master's program, and they have an audio engineering section, with recording and stuff. And so they came over and I did my song and dance for them. So that's been fun getting to work with them. And now the University of Texas. And so I wouldn't be surprised if when I do age out of engineer, everybody does, at some point in time, you become the old dude, and somebody takes over what you've been doing. I wouldn't be surprised if I taught somewhere or part-time taught, I really enjoy passing or paying it forward, A lot of people were really cool to me when I was younger. So it's always rewarding to kind of give back,
Well, maybe they'll build a monument to you in the town square that we'll have to tear down 150 years later one day. Well, that's awesome, man. That's great that you got all that stuff going on. Tell us a little bit about the bus glue plugins that you've created too. And are those, do you also enjoy using your own plugins in your own templates when you work, or are they sort of more of a reflection of some other stuff that you've set up as well?
No, I actually am one of those people that if I'm going to make something, I'm going to use it. So, and I have a whole bunch of drum samples through another company called Drum Forge, called Drum Shots. They're one shots and whatnot. And I use those religiously. So the plugins are my actual chain as diagrammed in the book, put into a plugin form. So, but what they are is they are dynamic processors. So so like the CLA plugin, the waves, it's got the delay and the verb built in. These were just dynamics. So there's no verb or delay. So these were meant to take the place of an entire channel strip, like compressor, de-esser, all that stuff. Just put on one plugin, turn up a couple buttons. It's preset. It's going to go. Now,
that's awesome.
Granted, they're built in, but since I work with templates and I'm a creature of habit, an acoustic guitar usually sounds like an acoustic guitar,
Mm-hmm.
And I figured out how to roll off the low end so it doesn't hum and buzz and get too big, how to compress it. So there's two knobs on there on the acoustic one. One is called squeeze and the other is called decorate. Every plugin's got a decorate button. So, which is basically the final limiter, just kind of squeezing all the juice, pounding it all together,
Yeah.
And some clipping and stuff like that. But I use those religiously. So if you open up like my session I was in doing today, if you open it up, you'll be like, oh, there's there. Yeah. Bus glue.
He did decorate that dang
Yeah.
thing.
He uses his own shit, whether it's good or not.
That's great. Well, some of the takeaways that I remember, and one of which I've definitely tried, is from our previous interviews. I remember you talking about using clippers,
Yes.
which was very interesting to me. I sort of actually it was a learning process for me. At first I didn't understand there was a difference between limiters and clippers and these different kind of ways to make things either loud or just deal with transients. And that you would use clippers on acoustic guitars. I think that was one of the things. And then also the act of immediately swapping out the kick drum with a sample. And I loved the way you described that. And my takeaways were understanding that low end is valuable real estate. So you have to be careful and you have to be selective about what's going on down there. And trying to keep your, that kick drum you worked so hard to record and that was there physically in the room, around with a plugin that is adding, a kick drum that maybe actually sounds the way you wish your first kick drum had sounded, is maybe even a little bit of a losing battle, whereas when you just replace, you just say, you know what, let's just use the sample. You get that consistency in the bottom and that consistency in the low end. And you don't have that phasing going on between low end components. And I got to use it on a mix not too long ago. I was like, I'm just going to do what Billy said, man. I'm just doing what Billy said.
Replacing.
What oh shit, what am I supposed to say? I'm supposed to say, Mr. Decker, please, sir. I'm just
Sir.
gonna use what Captain Decker, please, sir, said on the podcast.
Another thing that's funny, kind of in that same vein, when I was speaking at one of these convention things, I snapped up the whole track list or the session, and before I started dumping it into my template, I was like, okay, so we got a kick, we got snare top, snare bottom, and I was telling the engineer, this was when I was mixing by sight. I was like, all right, see that snare bottom? Delete it. Just throw it away. And everybody's like, oh, what? And then they had, tom, bottom toms, like throw the bottom toms. Those are garbage. And everybody's just like, what is he doing?
You know how much money we spent on those mics?
Oh yeah. They had near rooms, far rooms. I'm like, see the far ones? Yeah, just get rid of those. They're garbage. We're just going to use the near ones because we don't want, there was a time delay. It was like, that's stupid. Yeah. And then there was a mono room mic and a hose room mic and hall. And I'm just like, delete. And then we got to the guitars, and every single guitar had a DI, a 57, and then a Royer, and I'm like, okay, see the DI and the Royer, just throw them away. They're garbage. But I was just pitching stuff left and right. And everybody was just like, what the hell is he doing?
He hadn't even listened to it yet.
No, I don't care. Just put a 57 up, put a sample in, you're good. Overheads, rooms, top mics, let's go.
That's great, man. That's great. I love it. What about that underside of the snare? Is there anything about, is there anything that can bring to a mix? And do you have alternate ways to get that or anything like that?
Yeah, I've actually started keeping the snare bottom because a lot of times if they're doing a train beat or something like that,
yeah,
that you can roll that up and really hear the rattles on the snares and stuff. So, and a lot of times I'll even run that through the snare bus. Usually I won't put the bottom snare through the actual snare bus because it's so heavily compressed with the parallel. It just is like, it gets that paper sound, and the wires on the bottom of the snares. But if it is a train beat, I will ride that up, get that a little louder.
Yeah, that's something that I've dealt with recently where I was like, there were ghost notes happening on the snare that seemed important as part of the groove, but then I really needed to gate the shit out of and compress the shit out of the snare to make the crack right. And I needed to gate the snare because certain sections, the hi-hat was going crazy.
Oh, wow.
This was not, these are not examples of like A-list Nashville, right, drummer sessions. Do you sometimes have to mix tracks where the tracks themselves need extra attention? And, do you have any thoughts on ways to address that when things, when there's problems that are creeping in?
Yeah, a lot of times I'll get stuff that has been overly compressed. That's usually the thing I see most. Either that or it's so undercompressed, like on a snare drum, where you'll have these spikes and then little and then big, then little, and it's just a nightmare, especially if I'm trying to fire off a trigger. So a lot of times I'll go through and gain up the low ones or clip gain them up or whatnot,
Just more consistent snare hits, basically.
Yeah. And just get everything, a little smoothed out. I will say, though, that probably the thing I tell most people is I can probably make it sound good or decent, as long as it's not distorted. And lately, I've been getting a lot of vocals that you got people that are just recording at home and they're leaning into either the preamp too heavy or something like that. And so about the only thing you can do before you call them back and just say, hey, you're going to have to re-record this, because I hate to make that call,
Yeah.
So a lot of times I've found out that I can even distort it more and almost make it sound like an effect.
Yeah.
So if the verses were like way too garbly and the chorus is fine, or vice versa, I'll just literally grit it up more, decapitate it or sans amp it and put some kind of weird effect on it and basically hide it,
Yeah. Yeah. That's like a tip that Richard Dodd has shared on the podcast where he talked about how do you hide an elephant? You put it in a herd of elephants.
Yeah.
So you just gotta bury it in there a little bit more. So that's a good tip. OWC is your one-stop shop for flexible drive storage and connectivity solutions for your studio. The Mini Stack STX for your Mac Mini adds 2 additional drives over a universal SATA HDD SSD bay and an NVMe M.2 PCIe SSD slot, plus 3 additional Thunderbolt USB-C ports. Or the OWC Thunder Bay 4 chassis, built like a tank, gives you 4 hot swappable 2.5-inch RAID configurable drive bays, plus an extra Thunderbolt 3 jack for daisy chaining up to 5 devices. Or check out the OWC Gemini Thunderbolt 3 dock with 2 RAID configurable drives and 7 ports of connectivity, including a front-side SD card reader, 1 gig Ethernet, 2 USB 3.2 ports, and a dedicated display port, plus an additional backward-compatible Thunderbolt port. Get your studio connected with the Mini Stack STX, Thunder Bay 4, and Gemini Thunderbolt 3 dock at macsales.com/rockstars. Use the custom link in our show notes because it's a great way for you to help support this podcast. So thanks, Rockstars. Attention, all rock stars! iZotope has got you covered. With RX, Ozone, Neoverb, Nectar, and Vocal Synth, you'll have a collection of powerful apps and plugins that will help you get a professional sound in no time. Whether you're looking to clean up your vocal recordings with RX, master your tracks with Ozone, or add depth and ambience to your mixes with Neoverb, iZotope is your magic wand for awesomeness. Plus, with Nectar and Vocal Synth, you can easily add creative effects and unique textures to your vocals and instruments, from subtle mix enhancements to extreme sound design. iZotope takes your music and podcasts to the next level. Go to iZotope.com/rockstars and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any plugin purchase. What are some go-tos for you for adding a little distortion to a vocal?
Probably my favorite is Sans Amp. And then there's actually the Lo-Fi plugin by DigiDesign, just the stock plugin. You can lower the sample rate down, and they've got some kind of aliasing. I don't even know what that means, you know what I mean? But there's a slider for it. And then you get the bit rate and all that stuff. So,
and would you put that on the vocal track, or is that a parallel track that goes with the vocal?
No, I usually put it right on the track.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, with your mix template, are you somebody who just puts stuff right on that track and that becomes the vocal, or do you also have parallel aspects that you do use?
I do have parallel aspects. I parallel all the backgrounds. The drums are parallel. They've got a wet bus and a dry bus. And then those feed, so the wet bus is just super compressed, like 10-to-1, almost like pumping, like the dry one is nothing. And then it all feeds into a drum bus. Those feed a drum bus. So I guess, is it?
And the drum bus gets a little more compression?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The drum bus gets like 4 or 5 things outlined, like in my book. There's like a...
Read the book, man. So it's a RTFM. Read the fucking manual.
Or you could just buy my plugin and it's already preset. The drum plugin. It's already good to go.
Love it. Here, let me look at it right now. It's fun. It's always fun to look at plugins. Your plugins look great too, by the way. The one that is electric guitar just has this gorgeous sunburst finish. Like that was the thing. I wanted big. I love big chunky knobs, easy to use. I don't like all the plugins coming out nowadays are just like Fab Filter, just the real generic, they're great, but they're not fun to look at, Right.
So
especially if you're using them so you got to look at these things all day.
Oh yeah. So the electric plugin, the way a plugin's made is I go ahead and tell the plugin manufacturer what I'm using. So like say on my guitars, I use an API-B 550B style EQ, and then I use Joey's clipper or anybody's clipper, but in this case, I use the Joey Sturgis JST clipper, and then I used an L2, by Waves. So then I would tell him that, take screenshots of those, the plugin designer, and then I would have some audio and send the the actual plug-in code guy, he will play that, see what it's doing, how it's reacted, and then they model that, or more importantly, they don't model it from that. They have their own models of, say, like an 1176 that they've come up with. So they substitute theirs in there, match up the settings, and that's how it works. And then they put their own limiter, not an L2. They have their own limiters that they put on. So, but before you can do that, you got to get the graphics right. So you can actually put them in. So the graphics come first when you're doing plugins. So the dude was over in Sweden, okay? And he somehow forgot my last name was Decker. So the plugins came back, first of all, every single button I told you had a decorate knob. They said decerate. So he mixed that up. I don't know if it was a language barrier or not. But then on all these plugins started coming back really cool. And then I said, you know what? On the electric one, what do you think we do? You know what? I'm just going to leave it up to you. These plugins are looking gritty, cool, like the old Westworld on HBO,
Yeah, totally.
The big chunky knobs and brush metal and wood. I said, I'm going to leave the electric one to you, because he was having trouble figuring that out, and I gave him input on all the other ones. So he's like, you live in Nashville, right, Mr. Deckerator? And I'm like, yes, I do. He's like, that's the home of country music. I said, yes, it is. So a week goes by, a week and a half, bing, my email pops up. He sends the graphic. It is like this little horse going through the Utah desert with a cowboy, and he's got a rope. It's like, yeehaw, go with it, doggy. And it had a decerate button. I was like, time out. We are not riding horses. That Nashville is not riding horses. Downtown Nashville. We can't do this. This is not.
Dude, all right. I got an idea for you. So you can, for the next iteration of this, you add what's called an Easter egg. So you have, like, if you click 3 buttons and hit the top left screw, it will flip over and you see the other graphic, and you can.
Oh, that would be brilliant. That is so.
And it'll
fun.
play a horse sound. Coconuts, maybe.
It was like. I mean, it was so old Western. It wasn't even funny.
I hate to say it, but I think Zoom did such a good job of canceling out that whistle that we heard nothing. Yeah.
So anyway, that's how plugins are made. But anyway, he ended up coming back, and we got that thing fixed. And
where's the Clint Eastwood plugin? How come he hasn't made a plugin yet?
I don't know.
What's wrong with that guy?
I tell you who really pays me great praise for my electric plugin. Jeff Giuliano loves my electric plugin. He's like, I love just putting that on, and whatever it does, And I'm like, well, thank you, Jeff. I'm like, feel free to PayPal me too if you want.
Nice. Well, I'll send you over a tip after this. How's that?
There you go.
Let's talk about bass a little bit more. Your ears tell you when you're in the comfort zone, you're doing the right thing. But what are some things that you, and then that was a great tip about the B note sticking out. What are maybe some other tips for those of us who are in the learning stage about, identifying when the bass is sitting correctly in the mix? How might we think about it in relation to the kick drum, or, the frequency zone, or just like its relationship to the rest of the band?
So in my estimation, everybody talks, there's 2 ways to do bass, either above the kick or below the kick. I actually think of it in a third way, where the kick is right in the middle and the bass is wrapped around it. So it's not above, it's not below. The kick's right there, and then it's almost like a circle around the kick drum. That's how I visualize my bass when it's right. So I always do not let it get too subby. So I high pass all the time at 70 hertz. That's like the magic number for me, is to go ahead and just high pass the bass every time. And then, to me, the bass guitar loves to sing at like 100 hertz. I don't know what it is. And if you stop and think about it, every audio manufacturer, car stereos, everything, boom boxes, iPods, everything, bass and treble knobs, 10K, 100 hertz. There's a reason somebody figured that out way before me. You know what I'm saying? So I found that just easy 100 hertz works great. Sometimes I'll get up in the 120s or something, but if you just sweep it, you'll find where it just fills it in, you know? So kick drums, I always am down in like I try not to go with D10 presets. Like 60 hertz is always a go-to on every EQ. I always go, I'll be a little different. I'll sound different. I'll sound revolutionary. I'm doing 58. You know, everybody's going to notice my kick drum because it's not 60, it's 58. So I'll do little stuff like that. But for the most part, that's where your kick drum's going to live, you know?
So you describe the bass as being around the kick, but if we're rolling off 70 on the bass and we're reaching for the 58 on the kick, does it's
weird because I also use Waves Max Bass.
Right.
Are you familiar with that?
Yeah. And I always try to remember, like, when I think about those bass enhancer plugins, are they adding something? I don't think that one, I don't actually want to say what it does, but some might want to add some low end that's down deeper and some add low end that's above that frequency, right?
I don't know. I think it's below. I think it's some kind of a mojo. It's almost like the Sony Oxford inflator, which I use on my two-bus. I don't know what it does. It just does, you know?
Yeah.
So
so I guess that's where your ears come in handy, right?
Yeah. So I really don't have an answer for that. So, but I do know that you need to lock a bass in and you can't let it jump all up and down. Your low end has to be put in a box like this and it cannot get let go. So in my bass plugin and my favorite bass compressor is that stay level. What's
stay
that
level?
thing?
Yeah.
Stay level. Okay. So I actually had them model that into my plugin, but that's my all-time favorite. And I think it's a 24 millisecond attack. And I want to say somewhere around the 100 release. Something like that.
I can tell we're on an excited topic because I think I can hear you playing drum beats on the computer while we're doing the interview because we love talking about this shit.
It's something like that. I found out the specs. I spent hours on the internet finding out the attack and the release time because there's only one knob. It just does what it does, you know?
Yeah, on the stay level.
Yeah, you just feed it in and that's it. And it's preset. So, and I know Mike Shipley was a big advocate of that for his low end. And I always thought his low end was great. So I was like, that's good enough for me, you know?
And I think the stay level was originally Gates, wasn't it? Gates or Collins, one of those
Gates.
two? Yeah, Gates. Yeah. So I remember when I got to mix one of the first records, I got to go with a client to another studio and mix. We went to, now I'm going to blank on it while I'm trying to tell the dang story. We went to Memphis. And it'll come
Kiva?
to me just no. What's the famous studio? Where did Big Star make all the records? Was it's coming to me. Rockstars, help me out. But
Kiva?
anyway, we went and we
Kiva?
were
Kiva recording.
No, it wasn't Kiva. No.
Okay.
No, it was with the A. With A. Here, hold on, I'm going to look it up. Maybe I'll even drop a marker. Ardent Studios.
Ardent, yeah.
Jeez. Well, I'll leave that in there just to demonstrate that sometimes we got to remember. Howdy, rock stars. Do you ever feel like you're spending all this time watching YouTube videos, trying out mixing tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes, but it's just like not getting you anywhere? Have you ever wished that you could have more of a simple and straightforward process for creating a pro mix that wouldn't take you years to learn? Look, what if you could have a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all of your mixing struggles and could actually coach you through them? If these are any of the questions that you're struggling with, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is just for you. Now you can discover this proven step-by-step mixing system from Grammy-winning mixer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix from your home studio that will sound amazing everywhere. Listen to this quote from one of the students. absolutely the most informative and helpful block of information and mentoring on the mix process I've ever been a part of. It was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up tips along the way, condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session. That's from David P. Look, if you already understand the basics of mixing, but you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and check it out. In fact, I'm so confident that you're going to love this, that if you can't get a great sounding mix within 30 days, just send me an email and I'll give you a full refund, no questions asked. So go ahead and take your mixes to the next level like you know you want to at ultimatemixingmasterclass.com. We were mixing at Ardent, and we were mixing in the A room, and we were going to break it out through the console from ADATs or something like that at the time. Yeah. But I was just like, oh my God, they bring up the Collins compressors and the gates and the EQs. And it was so much fun to just try all that stuff. Cause they had all the original, these huge boxes, there's the size of like a television with tubes in them.
Oh, wow.
You just set them on the desk next to you and plug them in and use them.
You know what's funny? When you bring up all the old gear, a lot of the plugins nowadays have that analog button on them.
Right.
And I have never understood that. I've spent my entire life trying to get rid of hiss, and now they make goddamn plugins that go.
Yeah.
So I hit play, and before the leader starts going, I'm hearing all this noise. I'm like, oh, I got to go shut off all these analog buttons and all this wave stuff. Why do you do that? That makes no sense to me.
We need a shut off all analog button.
Oh my gosh. Let's just
I remember you talking about that. I remember you bringing that up on the interview, and I'm glad you did, because I've gotten burned by that before, where I'd work hard on a mix, and it wasn't until later that I was, in the mastering stage or something, and you really get turned up and you're like, oh shit, what's that? What's all that noise at the beginning of the track before it starts? And it was just some leftover analog noise hiss maker,
Oh, man.
Because by the time it gets compressed and goes through the rest of the signal chain, it's like all up in your face. What about loudness of mixes? What are your thoughts on that kind of thing?
I have started offering, I don't claim to be a mastering engineer, but a lot of times if I do an indie project, they will not have the budget to go to mastering, So lately, I've started including a high res with no limiter on the back end, and then what I considered like a Decker master. And it's basically kind of just ozone-y with some EQ and all that stuff. But I have actually found, and still do believe, louder is better. I can't get away from it,
Yeah.
If I'm sitting listening to two things and all of a sudden something else comes on and it's that much louder, it sounds better.
Right.
I don't know if anybody's ever going to get away with that. I used to mix a lot of demos for pitch meetings and stuff like that. And I always told all the songwriters, I said, let me get this as loud as possible, because if you come in to a pitch meeting or an A&R person to pitch a song and your music isn't as loud, it's not as good. I'm sorry. That's reality. Or if it's louder, all of a sudden it's better. It sounds more professional,
Well, and I think a good thing to remember is that while the loudness comparison may have changed because of how streaming services will readjust levels against each other, that's one topic. But for a long time, the music we're working on it's not on streaming. It's literally just being listened to the way you described it. We're just hearing A against B. We're playing things, of files off of computers or shared. I guess we don't really walk in with CDs anymore. We email files back and forth and listen that way. But I think that, it's good to remember that in that instance, a lot of the times we're looking for that thing that sounds loud enough to sound right to us,
I do know that Spotify uses their auto leveling algorithms and stuff like that. So if you come in too hot, it'll push it down and vice versa.
Yeah.
And also, I don't know if your listeners know this. I know you probably do. And I just recently found it out. But unless I go in to Apple Music and turn off the Atmos spatial thing, I'm not even listening to the 2 mix. It instantly defaults to the Atmos mix.
Really?
So if you mix a song and don't mix the Atmos, somebody goes and listens to that song, they're not hearing your mix. They're hearing the Atmos mix.
I recently noticed that my TV with the speakers that were hooked up, I was listening to a mix. And I was like, boy, this vocals sound low. And just for fun, not for a critical listen. But then I was like, let me just check the settings. And then I went to the audio on the TV and it was set to surround mode.
Oh, geez.
And I put it in normal and all of a sudden like the center image just popped up. So
don't even get me started on this Atmos garbage. I hate it. I mean, I've spent my life trying to figure out how to mix in 2 speakers. Why the hell am I going to mix in 22 now?
Yeah.
It's the biggest scam out there right now. It's unbelievable, my friend.
Well, it's interesting. So you're probably hearing other people talk about it as well. So you're probably getting a.
Oh yeah. And I hear a bunch of artists that aren't happy about it, you know? Because I mean, basically we are just stemming out our mix. And in theory, the Atmos guy just pushes everything to 0, gets our mix back, and then just does panning. But guess what's not happening? Levels or balances are changing. They're asking for more than just 2 mixes of the drums. Now they want the kick out. Now they want the snare. They might as well just call themselves a remix engineer, Take my damn name off the project. It's unbelievable. And it sounds like garbage. If you are not in an Atmos designated room, spec'd by Dolby, they come in with the lasers and they get it all marked out. It sounds like you're in a reverb tunnel. If the average listener hears that, and it sounds like garbage. And that's why the artists are complaining. They're like, this sounds like shit. We spent all this time and money working on this stuff. And then all of a sudden they give it to an Atmos guy that does 18 in a day, and it sounds like you just put a reverb on your mix. It's awful. It's awful.
Some of them do sound to me like it sounds like somebody just put you took like some kind of small room plug-in and just put it on the whole thing.
And I'm all about commerce. I'm all about, I never wanted to get in the Atmos thing. I could have jumped in early and probably been one of these guys that's got work for the next 10 years, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. I don't like it. I don't love it. And, I really think it's going to be like surround sound 7.1 in 2004. I think it's going to disappear.
We'll find out. We'll find out. I know one thing's for sure. 2 speakers sounds fucking great. And it's a lot of fun to listen to and grow up listening to music like that. And I never feel like I'm lacking for enjoyment of music that way.
No.
And I mean, so that was one of my questions too. One of the things that I still do, and I don't know exactly what my take is on the value of it, but I'm learning. It's evolving. Which is how often do you find it useful to check your mixes in mono?
Scott Hendricks always preached to me back in the day. I was mixing a John Michael Montgomery record, and he loved it. He thought it gives you a really good comparison for your low end. And to be honest with you, I did do it the other day, and it did give me a sense of the kick in the bass. And in this particular mix, when I hit mono, even though this is impossible, it sounded like my kick was above my bass. And I wanted this particular mix to have the circle around the kick, around it like I was talking about. So I went in and I just lowered the kick a bit and hit it back in mono, and it was like the circle was on the kick again. So it's a weird analogy, but I think there's a good thing to check the balance, but I think it's worthless because nobody listens in mono, So it's good for who's ever doing it if they know what they're doing it for. If you know where something's supposed to sit and you hit it mono and go, oh shit, I'm out, I got to back that down. But if you just do it and are expecting, okay, this sounds weird. Yeah, it's because everything's garbled like a piece of shit right in the middle. Nobody listens to a radio that was made in 1950s anymore. All right, that's
well, come on. We all got a few friends that still
true. That's true.
But I mean, one of the questions I always had was, does the mono thing give you an impression of like walking across the room and halfway through the door into the kitchen, and now you're hearing what it all adds up like? But I guess you can always just get up out of your chair and walk across your room and out the door into the kitchen and listen to the mix there too, all right. So when you're doing your loud version of mixes, I understand that you offer a decorated master if somebody wants it, but what about just sending a mix to somebody? Would you send a mix that also has an additional, like you feel like it's made loud enough so that it, and I know that's probably already been answered in the template itself.
Yeah, I mix into the master. I top down mix. So it's always on.
Okay.
So I always know when I'm done mixing, it's mastered. There's nothing additional I do. I mix into the mastering gear.
And remind us, do you also turn off the mastering and check the mix without the extra limiting at the end to check something? Okay.
So never.
Go for the sound, and that's the sound.
Yeah, it's the sound. And I always, if something goes out from mastering, I'll just pull off the final limiting. I'll just take the threshold back to 0. I'll keep the limiter on the plugin because I've got it set at -0.1. And true peak clipping, so it never goes over. But I will always send what I call the heated master or the Decker master for the mastering guy to hear, because he might go, man, this is what they've been listening to. I've got to at least get it this loud or this wide, or this is what they've been listening to, So it gives him a good point. And I've even had mastering engineers say, you know what? I ended up, even though yours was loud as hell, I used yours and worked off it. I didn't have to add any loudness, but I did do some EQing and some de-essing and some stuff like that. So I always send both and just say, hey, whatever you think. The other day, Mike Cervantes at Foxborough Mastering, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's up north, like Ohio or something, maybe Pennsylvania. Okay. But a friend of mine turned me on to him. He's done a lot of rock stuff. And it's one of the first times I got a master back. I mean, I've got plenty of great masters back. I don't mean to say anything bad about anybody that's mastered something for me before, but this was one of the first times where I was like, damn, I'm pretty good. He made me sound really good. I'm like, that sounds really good. And it was drastically different from my Decker master. So that's why I say I don't even pretend to be a mastering engineer. That's a whole other world, But it was really fun to get something back and go, damn it, that sounds amazing. Yeah, so in the meantime, I've been sending him tons of stuff lately. He's amazing.
That's great. And what's his name again?
Mike Cervantes at Foxborough. He worked under the great
It's coming. I'm looking up the
Master Mix. Hank Williams.
Hank's awesome, man. I used to go to him all the time.
Yeah, he's great. And Hank always made my stuff sound good, but Mike got a chance to work with Hank. And then he went up to the power station or something, or he worked somewhere in New York. And so yeah, he's great and super nice guy too. So
Foxborough.com. I found the website right there.
Yeah, he's great.
Cool. This episode is sponsored by Recording Studio Rockstars Academy. Are you ready to take your recording, mixing, and mastering to the next level and make your best record ever? Then visit the Academy to find the course that's right for you. Want to record killer drums in your studio? Then check out Rockstars of Drums to learn how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with a professional Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Or if you're ready to start mastering your own records at home, then check out Rockstars of Mastering, where I walk you through exactly how I mastered my own record, Skadoosh, the soundtrack to this podcast, in fact, using nothing but plugins in PreSonus Studio One. These techniques would work for you no matter what DAW you're using right now. And if mixing is your focus, then check out my free course, Mix Master Bundle, where I show you how to mix using stock and free plugins in Pro Tools. Plus, you get a look at how I recorded everything in my studio and multi-track downloads to practice your mixing and even include in your mix portfolio if you want. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started now, or look for the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. All right, let me see. What other questions? We're getting close to the end here, but let me ask you a question, because you mentioned Parallel on BVs. And one of my questions, listening to your discography, which Rockstars, of course, we got a link in the show notes, so just flip over there and check that out. And you can go hear a bunch of Billy's work there. Although I know you must have tons more than what we've got in the playlist too. but it's some of the stuff you had initially sent over. So one of them, Parmalee, feels like Carolina. One of the things I noticed that was cool in that one is you got this great lead vocal that's just sitting beautifully in the middle. And then when the backgrounds come in, they just had a subtle and a nice kind of wideness. They didn't seem to compete with the lead vocal at all. And I wonder if you want to talk about a little bit of ways of thinking about how to deal with background vocals so that we're not crowding out the main vocal, but we can still hear everything and it sits nicely.
Yeah, what I do is I just take the actual vocal chain, put it on the background subgroup, route all the backgrounds to that subgroup. I use the same lead vocal verb, but what I do for the backgrounds is I use a doubler, that Waves doubler, and I put it on 4 voices, and I feed an aux into that, and that's what spreads them out. But all my backgrounds are always hard left and hard right. So don't pan them into the same place where the vocal is, pan them out to the sides. But it's cool. The way with the doubler, they don't have that quality of hearing the hard pan vocals. It just sounds like a big kind of chorus around the lead vocal, like standing in a semicircle behind the vocalist almost. Yeah. And I always add just a little bit more reverb to the backgrounds than I do the lead vocal. So, and I never put delay on the background vocals. I only use delay on the lead vocal.
Okay, cool.
To kind of give it its own space. And I hardly ever put the doubler on the lead vocal because it washes it out too much. Yeah. And it just sets it too far back in the mix, which I found for country isn't very good. It works for rock and pop and stuff like that, But
let's talk a little bit more about things that might happen to a lead vocal. So do you find that your mixing strategy is one that kind of makes the vocal just sort of sit nicely together and then it's just this loud for the verse, it's this loud for the chorus? Or do you have to go through with the fader and do like all kinds of fader rides as part of an automation process on the lead vocal?
I hardly do any rides at all. So I've set up my vocal channel strip where it almost self-rides itself. So I hit it with an 1176, then an EQ, then that R vocal pulled down to -17. Then I hit it with a de-esser, but I hit it in the 2K range to take out the honk. And then I hit it again with a de-esser up in the 8, or if it's a female up in the 9s or 10s or wherever she's spitting, But other than that, I just, I'll go in and I'll lift the chorus up, usually 1 dB, and then comes back down for the verse, then hits the chorus, then the bridge, I'll usually go up a 0.5 dB. And then it's usually a breakdown chorus. So that'll bring it down to the verse level and then pop it back up. So it's very minimal writing, and I have found that when I use the ozone maximizer on my 2-bus, it's shocking what the different ISRC or IRC algorithms do.
The different options, they sound different.
Yeah. And if you want the vocal to really pop, you use 3 or 4. If you want the low end, you use 1 or 2. And if you want the guitars, you use 2. So it's weird to find the right one, but lately I've been using number 4, to be honest with you.
Right on.
And you can run the threshold way hotter on 4 for some reason, where I can almost get it down to -2. Whereas if I'm on 1 or IRC2, I can only get it to like 1.1, 1.2 before it starts getting gritty,
Nice. I love it.
So
I love how quickly you just dive right into the details. What's funny for me is you'll dive in so quickly into the details that a moment later I'm like, shit, what did he just say about that? But the good thing about a podcast, Rockstars, is you guys get to rewind this and listen.
There you go.
And I always encourage while you're listening, just have the notepad open on another app. You don't be afraid to hit pause, go over there, jot down the little note for that moment, come back later. Yeah. Because there's a lot of info that gets shared on this podcast, and you're going to want it all. So let me go to our closing question again, which you may have prematurely answered on this podcast, in fact, and you definitely have on other ones. But we take that Wayback Studio machine again, and you go back and find the previous Deckerator, and you come back and you say, look, here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself. What advice do you want to go back and give yourself again?
I would have told myself to trust my gut and if it sounds good, it's right. So I spent probably the first 10, 12 years of my life thinking I was doing something wrong, but it just felt comfortable and it always sounded good. But I thought, oh my gosh, I'm still like this goofball that's just, I don't know what I'm doing. And I told you the story when Chris Lord-Alge came in and stood over my shoulder and he validated each channel and said, do that, don't do that. That's great. Yeah, that's what I do, blah, blah, blah. And at the end of that little 45-minute visit he gave me way back in the day, I was like, damn, I've been doing this right all along, but I didn't think I was. And I think that lack of self-confidence probably kept me from puffing up and being like, hey, here's your record. It's done. This sounds great, you know?
Yeah. When you were starting out and kind of like developing your mix like that, did you feel like you would do something that felt right, but still maybe come back the next day and hear it different and make some adjustments to things? And I imagine that's changed for you now somewhat.
Yeah. No, I actually would do something and it sounded good, but I was like, this is impossible. You can't do this. You can't put an EQ before a compressor. That's like taboo because an SSL is laid out. The dynamics come first. So is the Neve and then an EQ. And there's a chain. There's a reason for that. And I was like, but you know what? On my acoustic guitars, for some reason, it sounds better if I put the damn EQ up first and then squish it and then limit it. So I actually took me a while, but I realized that's why I like the sound of my acoustic guitar. So I built that into my plugin. So it's exactly backwards, but there you go. You know, it sounds good.
Awesome.
So,
it's funny for me. I think I always started out putting the EQ before the compressor, and it wasn't until later I was like, hey, it sounds pretty good if you put an EQ after the compressor too. That's a different kind of sound. And now, of course, we got plugins. So you just move it. You just move one to the other side and see what you think. And like, oh, that's cool. And then you're fucked because then you're like, well, which one do I like? And now you're got to keep moving. Just make rock and roll, rock stars.
Oh, what's funny is I was doing a mix the other day and I put my plug-in on my electric guitars and it wasn't bright enough. So normally you'd put an EQ after it, but I was running it so damn loud that it was peaking out the EQ that I put on after it.
Oh yeah.
And then I was like, fuck. So I went and put it before it and it was like, oh, okay, it works. Fine.
We need, can you make a plugin called the Deckerator? Where when things are slammed and you just know you want to put something else on it, but you want to ignore the red lights that are happening, you can just
all you do is if it ain't red, you're dead. All right. Feel free to mix in the red. I'm convinced all these DAWs go red, but it's not distort. I personally know that for a fact. They've got little built-in headroom. It's like the gas tank light comes on in your car. You're at zero. No, they build in like 15 extra miles. So.
And then somebody scares you and tells you that there's like, sand and crud in the bottom of your tank.
Why is all those red lights on? I'm like, don't worry about it. I said,
Awesome.
turn it down low. You can only hear distortion at low levels. You can't hear it loud. So turn it down. If it's clean, you're fine. Don't look at it. Just listen.
Awesome, dude. Well, thanks for coming back on the podcast and hanging out with us again.
Always.
It's always a blast to talk to you, dude. Like I was saying when we took a break, I try and drop little markers for when you're on fire and it's a good quote. And I got so many markers that we're going to sample the entire podcast and just put it up at the front of the podcast as a
beautiful. Hey.
So let the rock stars know, where do you want them to go to check out more of your stuff? If they're ready to learn more about you, you got a gorgeous newly dialed in website. I think it's new. It looks fresh.
Yeah. Tell them to go to billydecker.com. It's got my cell phone there. It's got my email. And unlike a lot of people that's like, oh, I have to have an unlisted number. It's like baloney. I need to be able to get a hold of. I want people to call me. That's how I get work. So please call me, text me, DM me, anything you want. Email me. I'm happy to help or happy to work or happy to, I don't know, hit you over the head with a 2x4 or a framing nailer,
Awesome, man. Well, dude, great to see you again. Rockstars, thanks for listening. Mr. Deckerator, sir, I look forward to seeing you around the studio, dude.
Thank you, Lidge. Always a pleasure.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio. Just look for the link in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Hey, rock stars. I want to give a big thank you to our amazing sponsors who help make this episode possible. OWC, JZ Microphones, Atom Audio, Isotope, Spectra 1964, and Sampley. Plus, remember to use these coupon codes for special discounts. At isotope.com/rockstars, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin purchase. At jzmic.com, use the code ROCKSTAR for 40% off the V47, V67, or V12 microphones. Plus, get a free shock mount worth $120. And at Sampley.app, use the coupon code RSR20 for 20% off. And at recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy, use the coupon ROCKSTAR for 10% off. If you enjoy Recording Studio Rockstars, then please check out our sponsors using the link in our show notes, because it's a great way to help support this show. These are all things that I use in my own studio, and I highly recommend them for your studio as well. They're going to help you make your best record ever. I want to also thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko and Braden Stremming, for additional podcast and video production. Thanks so much for listening, Rockstars, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.